You're listening to the Analuia podcast, where faith and animation collide. Each episode will discuss the various topics in animated movies and TV shows, while also sharing our thoughts and opinions as they relate to faith and spirituality. Get ready to raise a hallelujah. It's time for Analuia.
And you're locked into another episode of the Analuia podcast. My name is Josh, and I'm here with my lovely wife, Rebecca.
Hello, everybody.
No special, add-on or pizzazz for that. I know you should do that like weekly. Then I'm like, Rebecca's enough.
Oh, thanks. I don't always believe that, but thank you.
But you are. So we are excited. So we're excited to have another guest on for this month, and this is actually something that we had a little ways back on our Anime Roundtable panel episode. So Rebecca, if you'll go ahead and do the honors and introduce our guest for this episode.
Yeah, so today we have E N Chaffin. She's an American author born and raised on country cooking and Japanese anime. She has made it her mission to upset the fiction world and change it for the weirder, moving even closer with each story that she writes. So welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Well, it's so good to have you on again. It's really nice to be. We got to know you a little bit during our anime roundtable, which was so much fun. I love doing that. That was great.
Yeah, I loved it too. And like right after, I'm like, I have to do something else with them. That was so awesome.
Oh, well, I'm so glad. So you're well, tell us a little bit about you growing up. I know we already got to know you just a little bit before on the roundtable, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I grew up in a small house with a big family. I have two older brothers, an older sister, then there's me, and then a younger brother. So 5 siblings and 2 parents. We've had dogs and cats, and we've had a whole farm before. But yeah, so growing up, I was, the weird one. Like I didn't really notice until people started pointing it out at school. She's like, oh, she's weird, da 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 da. And it was around that time that it's like, kids start getting into their own little groups and stuff like that. I noticed that a lot of kids just didn't want to get in a group with me because I was weird. I'm like, oh, great. And then we moved to town from a super small town to like a bigger town. And, I'm like, cool, it's my chance to not be weird. I can fit in. That did not work at all. So I guess God just made me weird. And, I know a lot of people, when they hear that word weird, they're like, oh, that's a bad thing. It's like, well, it's really not. It just means you're kind of a little extra, not a part of the ordinary. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, like Tim Tebow, he's weird because he prays to God, and so stuff like that. So I just accepted the weird and all. But yeah, growing up, I was really big into anime. I didn't even know it was called anime for a while. I didn't know like the stuffed toys were called plushies, or that, writing fiction about your favorite anime characters was called fan fiction. I didn't know any of that until like later on in middle school. So it's kind of weird for now, knowing that like a lot of kids that I see in school and all that, they're like, oh, hey, we already know all this stuff. I'm like, cool. I did not when I was your age. So yeah, a little bit about me, I guess.
Yeah, you're like, I just like what I like, man.
Yeah.
If you call it weird, okay, I'll find other weird people like me.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also heard it said that there's this like obsession or this need to want to be normal. And I've heard the analogy like, it's okay not to be normal. Normal is a setting on the washer.
Normal is a setting on the washer. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Nice.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. And for me, like, I just started thinking that normal is just everyday to you. Ordinary is usually what everyone thinks is normal, because ordinary is like everyday to society, and normal is what's everyday to you. Because my normal and someone who lives like halfway across the world, their normal is totally different. So
Yeah.
And just, I think it's because of anime and seeing a different aspect or a different view on life that, the people who created anime, all the different shows that what they had helped me realize that later on. I'm like, oh, that's neat. So cool. I'll be the weird normal. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I've been thinking recently as we've been watching different shows, I'm like, I really wish, because I didn't grow up loving anime. This is a more recent thing for me. And I wish that I had have watched more of it because it covers so much of life
Mhm.
and helps you process things. And I wish that I had have had that. It would have been like, oh, maybe I wouldn't have been so, I don't know, boy crazy or like to the point of cringy, maybe I would
Instead,
have,
you could have been 2D boy crazy.
well, I could have, yes. Which probably would have happened if I was into anime at that time.
Yeah. I think we all have those cringy moments. Those moments where like, yeah, it's fine, and then we think about it like 10 years later, and we're like, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Accept the
Exactly.
cringe and move on.
And that's hard,
Yeah.
That's so hard. I was thinking about it just earlier today, like random thoughts that'll pop into your head. And you're like, oh my gosh, why? Why? And then you're like, stop it. Stop thinking about that. Just move on. It's okay. It's in the past now.
Yeah.
It's hard. Mhm. Yeah. So you're an author
Mhm.
of you've written Loading Life, it's like Pride and our vice? Our vice?
Avarice. Very
Avarice.
close.
Okay, okay. Um, so, and they're a two-part in your Sin series. So tell us a little bit about this series.
So it was so funny. Like, I thought of this idea of the Sin series when I was like, what would the dumbest name for a vampire be? And I thought about him like Joey. Joey would be the dumbest name for a vampire. Because you could go with the obvious like Bob, but I don't, just like I couldn't imagine like a big, huge, fierce vampire being named Joey. Like, especially since Joeys are like little baby kangaroos. And so from that thought sprouted all the other thoughts and ideas of the Sin series. And I even have things planned out for like the books way in the future. So I kind of know like what the whole story is, but unlike God, I don't know every single bit. I wish I did. It would make writing so much easier. Um, so yeah, from that little thought sprouted the whole Sin series. And then I started planning out Pride and actually writing it and then publishing it. I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool. And for anyone who's interested, Pride is a free ebook. Little plug right there. I made it free just because I'm like, it's the beginning of a series. And if people like it, like cool, free book and a start of a cool series. And if you don't, it's like, well, at least you didn't have to pay for it and all that. And then right now I'm writing Avarice. I'm almost done editing it. I did get a full-time teaching job. So I'm like, oh, okay, let's juggle. So I'm hoping to still get it out by the end of this year. It's so close, so close. If I could just grade papers and write at the same time, it would be great. But each book follows a certain deadly sin. Of course, pride for the first one, and avarice is another word for greed, which I'm like, ooh, that makes it sound all fancy. Let's use that.
It
And
does.
then yeah, and then I actually have a whiteboard in my room, and I have all the names written down. So when I get to reveal those, especially the last book, I love the name of the last book, so I'm so ready. At least for the titles. And so like it doesn't just like focus on each sin. That's kind of one of the themes, but it focuses on this whole world. And I used to call it the nectere series because nectere means to connect or bind together. Like everything's connected, which is how, our world is. Everything's connected. Um, but I decided to call it sin series because people would probably be like, what's that word? And it does have to do with sins. And the really cool part is when you see a main character or a side character in one book with, someone's viewing them in a certain way. In the next book, you might see them viewed in a different way because someone else is actually watching them. Kind of like in the first book, you have Kai. and one of her best friends is named Goldie, and they hang out, and she's about the only person Kai can stand who's her age. And then, she is a little girly girl and all that, but Kai really enjoys her time and just like loves this girl. And she's like, she's my bestie. I want to protect her. And that's what motivates Kai to do things as well. Not just with Goldie, but with all of her friends. And then in the second book, you see Goldie, but it's through Azana's eyes. And Azana's, completely different character. And she's older than Goldie, so she doesn't see her like necessarily as a best friend, but maybe like a little sister type character. And so, you see that with a lot of different characters and how they relate to each other. And you even see like the villains in a different light depending on who's watching them. Cause that's just like the world is too. And so this is my first series and it's my biggest series because 7 to 8 books, that's a lot of books. Usually people write trilogies and like, no, I want to be extra. I want to write 2 trilogies and 2 extra books just because. Because with Loading Life, I didn't expect to actually make a second book. And with this, I'm like, oh, wait, I have to plan for everything. So it is exciting, and I'm like, I don't know, I feel super excited about writing this story and having all these thoughts in my head actually come to life on the page. But also I'm like, oh no, I have to write a whole series. Can I just like write down the summary? Like, no, that won't work. So, but it's also helping me grow as a writer and to be able to express what I see in my mind, that movie that I always see, and express it on paper and express it in a way that people understand and can enjoy. And another aspect of it is just, the whole series, it takes all these like stereotypes of vampires and of witches and of hunters and all that, and then just flips them on their head. And I like doing stuff like that because it can annoy people, but sometimes people are like, wow, that's actually really cool.
Nice. Well, good luck with your series. That sounds like a lot of fun and a lot of work ahead. But
Yeah.
I like that it follows, like it's the same universe and it sounds like it's the same characters, but from different points of view.
Mhm.
So you get to see, I don't know, I like that. It's like you get to world build really nice when you do
It's
that.
Yeah, it's really fun. And I'm discovering a little bit more about the world as I go on. And I even have plans of when this series is done, doing other series that kind of connect to the same world. So characters, because I have a lot of characters, not just background characters, but kind of like just a big cast, just so I could like be able to play with them more and, work with them. But in other series that I have planning, because I just plan everything and I write down notes and stuff like that and be like, oh, this be a good idea. Some of those characters could come up in those series, which that would be fun for people who've read all of my books. They'll be like, oh, I know this person.
Yeah, I love that. I love the little like Easter eggs in
Yeah,
like series or books that you read. They're like, oh, I see you.
exactly.
So fun. Um, so where do you draw your inspiration from in your writing?
Everywhere. I know some of my students have asked me that. I'm like, I can't really say everywhere. A big portion, of course, is from anime. Like I said, I grew up with anime. I started watching when I was like maybe 4 or 5. My first one was Ronin Warriors. And so like just because anime, there's just such a variety. And even if you don't like kind of like, Spy Family when we talk about that. You may not like spy stuff, but you could like another part of it. So you'll watch it anyways and be like, oh, that was actually really good. And that's been me with anime. People always ask, well, what's your favorite type of show or, genre? I'm like, anything that interests me. That goes with shows, anime, books. And so not just with anime, of course, but like with anything, like if it's interesting, I'll read it, I'll watch it, I'll look at it. And I just, if I find something really interesting or really funny, or I'm like, oh, that would actually be a cool point to make in a book. Or if it's something that I'm like, well, I wouldn't do it that way, I would do it this way. I grab that inspiration and like run with it. Kind of like the vampire aspect in the Sin series. like people are like, ooh, vampires are brooding and dark and sexy. And I'm like, yeah, but what if they were funny and they tripped on stuff? That would be fun. Not all my vampires trip, but
Yeah, it reminds me of oh, what's that show that we were watching about vampires that was really
Oh,
funny?
yeah, the vampire dies in no time.
oh
Yeah, have you seen that one?
no, it's on my TBR list
Oh,
Yeah.
it
or
is a good
TBW
one.
list, I guess. Yeah. I have
Yeah, it kind of flips the script like you
Yeah.
were saying about the
yeah.
whole vampire thing. It's good.
And of course you
That's
got John the armadillo.
Oh, yes, he's best boy.
that's that's so awesome. Yeah, and it's stuff like that, like, whether I'm like, oh, maybe I could change this into something else or switch it on its head, or maybe it's like, oh, I really love it. I will say, like, especially for anyone who does want to write or draw comic books or something like that, if anything inspires you, write it down, jot it down. I have like a whole huge stack of papers from like years of like just story starts. I have napkins written on. And then recently I actually started using this thing called Google Docs.
Oh.
I have it attached to my phone. And then I'll just, whenever I get an inspiration, especially if it's at night, and I'm like, why am I being inspired at night? God, I need to take a rest. And he's like, no, here's an idea. And so I'll just grab my phone, go into the doc, and then type it out, like, or use the, speech to text feature and then have it there, and then I can rest. And if it's an idea with a certain book I'm writing, kind of like Avarice, I'll write it in its own specific document and be like, hey, so and so does this, and I think it'd be really funny or something. Yeah, and then the biggest thing too is real life. Some people look so much at media that they forget that real life is also funny and horrible and interesting too. Especially if someone cracks a joke and you're near, it's not like you're eavesdropping, but come on, they're really loud and you can hear them. Write it down real fast.
Yeah, that's true. The world around you is such great inspiration.
Mhm.
Let's see. So one thing that we wanted to talk about today also is the book that you wrote. That's a guide for parents and guardians who have kids that are into the otaku life, otaku, anime, manga, cosplay, all of that kind of stuff. So what led you to actually writing this book
Yeah,
for parents?
and before you answer that question, we want to thank you for sending us this copy. I
Yeah.
read through it. It's really great. Um, in my opinion, not just great for parents and guardians, but somebody who's wanting to read an introduction as to what anime, cosplay, and manga is. Great resource here as well.
Awesome. That's good to know. Yeah, like I started it, I wanted something to back up loading life, because I'm like, well, maybe if I had something for the parents and guardians at like conventions, they would actually, buy loading life for their kid and then buy this book or something like that. And so when I really started thinking about it, though, I'm like, when I was a kid and I was reading through this, reading manga and watching anime and wanting to cosplay and go to conventions, my parents were like, what's anime? They were just like, what is this stuff? And they kind of knew about Dragon Ball Z because of course that was the biggest one. But with everything else, they're like, is this okay? Is this not okay? Um, and so there and the internet, even though it was getting bigger, it's like this was the 90s and early 2000s. Like it wasn't that big yet. Facebook didn't exist yet. And so like and now today it's kind of the opposite. You have all this information, you have everything at your fingertips, but then what's like a good advice and what's bad advice? Or what's like saying like, oh yeah, it's totally fine for everyone, but it's just a person who like doesn't work with kids and all that, and they're not thinking about like how a child develops over time. And so I wanted to make something, the parents guide for those parents who were like my parents and didn't have an outlet, or just didn't understand. It's like, is my kid going crazy because that's what the internet's saying on one side, and maybe even the news station saying, oh, anime is bad, or is it actually okay? And I know one of the first parts one of the introduction parts I wrote is that, there's 3 parts of anime. It's not just for children. It's not, bad stuff. I don't know if I could say that word. And it's not a Western concept at its core. So it's, Asian concepts, and which is a whole different culture. um it's, and then for the children part, I do talk about the rating system at one point where parents are like, oh, that makes sense. So if it's, it's a lot easier than just young adult book. Because young adult could be 13 to 18, and like, cool, that's a big gap. But with mine, with talking about this stuff, I just wanted to make it as easy and as straightforward as possible. Because I've gotten some books where they talk about anime, manga, and cosplay, usually separate books, usually anime and manga, and then cosplay's over here because that's a different thing. But I'm like, well, it goes under the same tent. So, and then if anyone looks at it, it's like, it's a small book because I wanted it to be small enough for, parents to not be like wary of it, and for them to be able to just sit down and actually read it and go, oh, I understand now. So it all comes from just being able to understand it and being able to make even better decisions for the kids. Um, because especially as a teacher and as uh, being at home when my parents were raising 2 of my nephews and my niece, and then just growing up in general and remembering all that, like, kids develop at certain times in their life. A 10-year-old is way different than a 15-year-old, and it's not just because of puberty, it's because of like where they're mentally at, and can they handle and understand certain things. And yeah, so that's where it all comes from. I love and adore children, and I want them to stay safe. And when one of my ninth graders says, oh, I've watched the show, and I'm like, ooh, you should not be watching that show. You should be waiting until you're 18. And that's the whole reason of writing the Parents and Guardians Guide. And I've also wanted to expand the series into things like video games and, other aspects of not just the nerd community or, the otaku community, but just like anything that parents would be like, what is this again? Like, whoa. So there'd be like just easy guides for people to just get off the shelf, read real quick and be like, ah, understand. And then to keep it just in case they need to reference it back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a great thing to have for parents to have. And I know we're increasingly getting older here, and even though we're like, and even though we're in the nerd culture,
Mhm.
like some things can escape us. Like it took me forever. I was reading, I think, a webtoon that was talking about all the people in the comments were like, "Oh, this character's so OP," and I was like, for a long time, I was like, what does OP mean? I have no idea. And come to find out it was overpowered. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. So yeah, even silly little stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, yep, a little guide would be nice. Then again, I guess that's what the internet's for.
Well, and also OP can be interchanged with original poster
If
depending
you're on
on,
Reddit,
yeah,
yeah.
depending
Yeah.
on the context that it's used in.
Yep.
Yeah. And then like talking about words like that, there is the word Lolita. Because
Mm.
a lot of older generations, they think of that word and they think of the Russian novel Lolita, which is way different than actual Lolita Ware. And I actually point that out in the book. It's like, it's when your kids use it, they don't mean that. They probably don't even know about the Russian novel. And so it's like
No.
it's totally different. Or if they use certain words like just I have a whole dictionary worth back here, but yeah, if they use certain words, you'll know. And then to make it even easier, I actually have an actual dictionary in the back with it like Steam, what's Steam, like, because someone could be like Steam, like the Steam. It's like, no, Steam, like, the video game stuff, the PC gaming and stuff like that. Like, oh, just make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I didn't even know about. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, and I think also expanding this into video games would be a good idea
Mhm.
because, I mean, anybody with like a gaming system, PS5, Nintendo Switch, whatever it might be, um, unless if you're a parent that is kind of managing that account, it doesn't ask, hey, this is rated M. Are you old enough? Or this is rated teen. Are you old enough? And these 10, 12-year-old kids are playing games like Red Dead Redemption, The Last of Us, which, if you're over 18, sure, but I mean, it's pretty violent.
Yeah. And then, drawing from my teacher background, just stuff like that, making parents aware that, hey, you can actually do this. And these games, that's why they have the, um, it, a child's brain, how it develops is really interesting because it develops super fast, but from birth to like around 7 years old. And then it's still developing faster than an adult brain does, but it kind of slows down there to, make way for the puberty stuff and all that. So like a 10-year-old seeing all that blood and guts, it does something to their brain that actually can damage it in a way. And that's why you have, when kids go through a lot of trauma and all that, it's a part of their mental system as much as their emotional system. And just having parents aware, especially in this day and age, like we were saying, you can have everything just like that. And especially since a lot of kids, they have phones, and their parents either just don't know that they could get on that stuff, or maybe the kid is tricking the parent, or maybe they both are like, oh, this is a thing. Uh-oh.
Yeah, for sure. I know my dad talks about uh my half brothers, I guess. Anyway, my little brothers that are still at home.
Mhm.
Um and they have phones. And I think the littlest one has just an iPad, but they like shut it. There's parental controls, thankfully, that you can have on
Nice.
phones. Thankfully, for whatever reason, though, the one that's like 12 years old, he's 12, his turns off every day automatically. And my dad's like changed the passcode and changed all of these different things. He's called Apple. And I'm like, are you sure he's not on like message boards and finding out ways to hack your phone to turn that off?
Mm.
Because he's like, it's not, it's like, I think he had a phone and then it cracked. So he's using an older phone now and it's still happening. So it's like, it's not the phone.
Yeah.
Something's going on here. So there's tons. I was like, Dad, there's tons of message boards out there. I'm sure someone has figured it out and is telling him how to turn it off.
Oh, absolutely. Do not underestimate the power of Reddit.
Oh my
Like,
gosh,
there are
yeah.
so many users that you'll learn so many tips and tricks around things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He should get him like a tablet, an actual stone tablet, and be like, here's your phone. And then,
Yeah.
chisel, here's how you text people.
Mhm.
It's like,
Or
that's what
snail
you
mail. You can
yeah.
send it. Mm-hmm.
Or, back in the day, it's like, a guy holding up two pencils. These are your new computers, and it comes with its own delete button.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, as previously mentioned, we're going to be talking about Spy Family today. So
Woohoo.
we can't start this off without doing a little bit of vibing. And this, I think, has won a lot of awards during this anime season. Just from, best voice actor, best character, overall best anime of the season. And at the time of this recording, season part 2 is on its way in just, I think, about 2 weeks.
Oh, so it's still season 1, but part 2 of
I
season
think
1?
so, yes.
Oh.
They like to torture us.
I know. Why?
So, Spy Family, for those of you who are not familiar with, and if you're not, why aren't you? It is a story about a spy by the name of Twilight who takes on a identity of Lloyd Forager to carry on a mission to infiltrate a highly esteemed individual. But in order to do that, he has to create a family This includes a child and a wife. And with being a spy, having to juggle that along with being secretive doesn't come so easily.
Yeah. And he has to get like a wife and a child in like a week, right?
Mhm.
It's like only 7 days. Like, what?
Yes.
Okay, he's awesome, but how is he going to do that? Thankfully, things happen to where he actually gets it done.
And we want to focus on the whole trope of found family. So we've seen this in other areas. Well, first of all, found family is the trope where you're not biologically, related, but you find this group of people that you really connect with and that you care about, and they've become your family. We've seen this in other shows, such as Fairy Tale.
And plenty of others.
Yeah. So, Elizabeth, with Spy Family, what, why is this something you chose for us to talk about today?
Cause it's awesome. That's why. No. Well, it's really funny because I saw it like blow up and people are like, "Oh, you should watch this." And like, well, you say that about a lot of like really you know, just big shows and all that. I'm like, would I actually like it? Hmm. And so I sat down and I watched the first episode. I'm like, I love this. It is mine. I'm sorry if you hear dogs barking in the
They're fine.
background. But it's like, yeah, from the first episode, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be good. So, and I was really excited because there hasn't been like a big show in a long time that I've been excited about. Cause I'm like, well, does God actually want me to watch that show? But with Spy Family, even though it has like the dark, gritty bits and it's mainly about, of course, the family and how Twilight and Yor and Anya just become an actual family, even though that's not any of their missions. They're just like, we need to survive. This is how we're gonna do it. And then oh, and of course, even in the first part, even those first 12 episodes, like they're just becoming family. And I think the reason why a lot of people are attracted to that and attracted to the found family trope in general is because it's just something that we all want. I've always been taught it's like everyone has a God-sized hole in their heart and they try to fill it with things and with other people and all that, but it doesn't get filled. And of course, the only one who can fill it is God. It's, is Christ. And, kind of like found family in Spy Family. That's how we all are. It's, God created us to be a part of his family. We get lost and ran away because of sin, whether we feel guilt or whether we're like, well, we don't wanna, whatever it is, we get separated from him. And then here he is not charging in and just dragging us back home, but coming as a savior and as someone who loves us and getting down and washing our feet and being like, I'll be everything for you. I'll be that found family if you give me a chance. And then if I'm your found family, then you won't have to worry or have to yearn for anything else. And in recent years, I've been getting closer and closer and closer to God, even more than I ever have, because, I just finally said, I am stupid, God, or at least I was acting stupid. Yeah, I want to do life your way. And he's like, okay, I waited for you, that's why I waited. And watching Spy Family, it just reminds me of that. It reminds me, of course they get together in a different way than I got together with God, but they all need each other. And it's that bond that they create, even if they aren't technically related by birth, because that's how my family was. We're a big family because what people blended family. That's what people call it. Some of my siblings are either my half siblings or my step siblings, and my dad, who I've always known as dad, is technically my stepfather. But I never viewed our family as a blended family. We're just family. Twilight, Anya, and Yor, as the story goes on, they're not just a blended family or just like we're just doing this just cause they're family, period.
Yeah, I love that. And I love relating that to the blended family. So many families are like that right now. This the whole idea of the, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. Family
Mhm.
and family too, I think, has been so attacked recently over the past, I don't know, however, 20 years or
Yeah.
so. Um, and it's like, oh my goodness. And I think, yeah, I think that that's why this idea of found family is so attractive to people, is that we all need that. Like you said, there's a sort of God sized hole in all of us. The cliche at this point, but true. And so, um, yeah, I love that, the idea of that.
And going on with the whole family, and a lot of people I read like did not like or didn't understand why everybody was so, you know, engorged by Spy Family, that its popularity. And some people like it for the fact that, hey, your Anya and Lloyd, they represent somewhat of a model and normal and stable family.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's very true. It
Yeah.
reminds me of in the very first episode, which we rewatched last night. Um, Lloyd passed out on the couch, and Anya goes to like answer the door to get the mail, and he's like, the mailman's like, "Can you give this to your mom or dad?" And Anya's like, "There is no mama." He's like, "Oh, sorry." And she's like, "Nah." Yeah, and so she takes it back to Lloyd, but it's really adorable how she just latches on to him so quick and is like, "I'm not leaving."
Yeah. And I think that's a thing that, like, I think that's why there's a lot of trouble. And there's always trouble in the world. There's always bad things in the world. But I think a lot of it hits home because, I go to school and I try to teach these kids, and my job should be teaching, but it expands into being someone who's like, without saying it, helping them understand that, there is someone who does love them and care for them. Christ is there for them. So since I can't necessarily say it out loud, I could show it to them with my actions and being, just telling them it's like, you're going to pass my class, not because I'm going to allow you to just slip by, but because I'm going to work with you and help you every step of the way. But you have to like actually want it too. And then with just just the world in general. I know a lot of people who are mad and hurting and want to hurt others, but it's just because they don't know, like, that they could just rest in God, that they can just, like, you know, all that tension and built up anger towards people who may have hurt you, it just releases. Um, there was one point where someone asked me, it's like, well, aren't you like mad at anyone? Isn't there anyone you're really angry at? And I'm like, no. Like, there's a lot of people who've hurt me in the past, but I'm not really mad at them. Like, maybe I do wish like things would have come better, it might have been their fault or my fault, but with God, I can be like, no, I actually don't hate anyone. Like, maybe I don't understand them, but I don't hate them. And that's with like, especially with Lloyd, seeing him grow, and he does want to like protect his family, and he always says it's like, oh, it's for the mission, it's for the whole good. But you can tell as the story goes on, it's like, it's mainly because you want to be a dad. It's like embedded into you to protect, because that's what dads do.
Right.
They protect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that goes along with, everyone in a family has a role.
Mhm.
The world likes to mix it up, but yeah, there's a role that was assigned to us in the garden. Dads, men, husbands, they protect. They're the protectors of the outward
Yeah,
world, and women,
we
I
protect the
see.
inside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it as protectors of the heart. Because I mean, think about it. We're very in tune with emotions and feelings and all of that. And um, guys can't always see that. Sometimes they do, but not always. And so we try to help that. And
Yeah, this
yeah,
one
it's
here especially has helped me through a lot of, just emotional anxiety and whatnot. So
my
You know,
job,
yeah,
Yeah.
go you.
And see, that's the cool part too, like how God, he did make us in his image, and then he kind of like not necessarily split up
Yeah.
and like put like, okay, women you and men here, da 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 da. But it's like if there's a problem, a woman, she does want to fix it, but first she's like, are you okay? Usually in general, most women are like that. Are you okay? And then for men, it's like, how can I fix the problem? So we're coming at the same thing in two different ways. But when we do that and we work together, we actually solve the problem and we make sure people are okay. And then I do love it, like Spy Family. I love it because your can't cook, you know,
Yeah.
and that's a mom job, really good cook, but she can't. But is that what a mom is really about cooking? Or is it really about making sure that her daughter is prepared for school and can make friends and tries her best to help her daughter be empathetic towards other people? And so you see both parts of yours. She can't cook, but she can help Anya do this.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that both of them are really exploring what does that mean to be a parent. And yeah, it's so cute. And I love the song that Josh was playing earlier, which is the ending song. I love the animation that goes along with that. It's so
Yeah.
adorable.
Oh, it's
They're
so
like
cute.
just playing with Anya and just having family time. And oh man, it's just like it just warms the heart. And I think, I was thinking when we were talking about kids and family and the whole blended family thing. There's at some point in I think it's either the first or second episode where Anya asked the like most heart wrenching question. She's like, "Am I keeping all the mamas away, like because
Yeah.
she exists?" And it
Yeah.
was like, no, it's not your fault because kids do that so often. Something that is not their fault at all, they take it on as theirs. And it's just like, no, it's not
Yeah.
you.
It's like when parents divorce and the kids is like, it must be my fault because I'm the only thing, they're arguing over me. But in reality, it's just that maybe the parents didn't listen to God, or, it could be a whole
A
slew
lot
of
of things.
things. And so for the parents, hopefully that won't happen. But for the parents to try their best to like counseling, do something,
Yes.
work it out. Or if it does end in divorce, just going to the kid and being like, both of them saying, it's not your fault. It's just that we can't get along. And it's to the point where we'll be better friends than husband and wife, just letting them know that. And then when Anya does do things like that, it just like it breaks my heart because I've seen that in school, and I've like anytime that happens in a book or movie, I'm like, oh my heart. Because kids will do that since they don't know any better, and they'll some kids will be like, oh, he broke the vase, da da da, and blame it on someone else. But when it comes to something super serious, they'll usually blame themselves because they don't know who else's fault it is. And then they don't know how to fix it. So they just end up like keeping to themselves and closing in a shell. Kind of like, and I haven't read the manga, so I'm not too sure, but kind of like when Anya's, real parents get popped up into a conversation. And then she just goes like, oh, she's just shocked because, she's a little girl. Of course she would be shocked.
Oh
Something traumatic
yeah.
happened.
Yeah, during
The
during the
interview.
yes, oh gosh.
Oh
I just
yeah.
I'm so glad someone punched that guy. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
punching people.
Right. It's not a good thing, but
Well, going back to like Lloyd and his introduction, he says, when I became a spy, I gave up the idea of having a family, wife, child, a normal life. Whenever I accepted, this lifestyle. But in the first episode, he's really come to terms about, okay, this is for the mission, but do I want to be a dad? And this is kind of this little exchange takes place between him and Anya towards the ending of episode one.
I want to go home. Back to our place, Papa.
You do? You're sure?
If you leave me behind, I'm gonna cry.
She's been adopted and returned 4 times now.
Anya Williams, Anya Levsky, Anya Roche. Okay. Well, let's go home then.
I know.
I know,
It's
yeah.
like, oh.
But 4 times, so I mean, you've got this kid
Yeah.
that's been passed around, and we were thinking like she she has the ability to read minds, and so you see a flashback of her at, I guess, this research institute. So we're thinking, did she run away from that institute and she became an orphan, or like kind of like what happened? So I hope we get some more information about her past.
Surely we will. That's like a huge piece that they're
Yeah.
leaving out right now. I can't imagine they would just like leave it hanging.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because we know more about like Lloyd as Twilight than we do about Anya as like her past. And he's the spy, you know?
Yeah.
So it's oh yeah, I love it how he's just like, you know what? Yes, I'm gonna take care of this child because even though he may not realize it, that's just such a dad move. That's like, I want to protect this baby, you know, even though he's like, this is for the mission. It's like, yeah, denial right there, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's you know, it reminds me of at our small group on Wednesday for church, we were someone else was having this conversation of, I think they were like training to be foster parents at one point, and they're one of them people said, um, you know, they'll literally come to the door with a baby and say, "Can you take this little baby right now?" And you're like, I mean, who's gonna say no? My schedule is just
Yeah.
not okay right now. Of course, you're gonna say, yes, I will take care of this poor helpless little baby, this child. Like, how can you say no to that? Um, and it's, you know, I kind of think that's what Lloyd is kind of feeling right now. Of like, oof, protect. Yeah, like you said, such a dad move. That's just ingrained in who he is.
Yeah.
And I think he also kind of relates to Anya a bit more because, like, when she cries and whatnot, it brings up that memory of, like, you know, when I was a kid, like, that's all I could do was cry. Like, there was no one to help me. And that is what kind of set him on that course to be the protector. So that is in his, like, innate nature to be that person.
Yeah. Especially and then when you put it like that too, it's just, you know, it's like kind of like we were talking about with the world, you know, it's going crazy and everything. Hurting people are just hurting others because that's all they know. But, you know, like Lloyd, we need to take an example from him and just be like, when we do hurt others, we're just causing more pain, more hurt. But if we got hurt in a certain way, we need to protect others from that hurt. So kind of like, you know, if a friend never calls you back and, you know, you just don't hear anything, because that's happened to me before. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess you ghosted me. Cool. You know, I try to do that where if, you know, I'm going to be gone for a long time, or if I work a long time and I see a text from a friend, I want them to know it's like, hey, I'm still here. You know, I'm so sorry. I've just been busy. And, or like if I find out that someone's sick or something, you know, just being like, even if it's a quick text, just saying like, hey, I'm here for you. I'll pray for you. Especially if that certain friend doesn't know God yet, you know, just being that connection to God. Because I've gotten hurt in the past and I don't want them to hurt that way either. So, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had this come up, you know, with a few of my friends from the past, and where it's like, hey, you know, we should get together. It's like, hey, I had this idea or whatever it is, and like, oh yeah, cool. You know, I'll text, and then I just won't, you know, respond, and it's like, hey, I've just been really busy, and I say myself, I just don't have time to commit to you. I don't have this. It's like, okay, do I not really have time, or am I not making the time?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very good question.
And yeah, you know, Rebecca and I are busy doing dance stuff. We're doing this
Yeah.
podcast where she's got counseling and all this stuff, but yet we can make time for people.
It's an
Yeah.
intentional thing.
Exactly. And then also, because that reminds me, like, a lot of my friends are starting to get married and stuff like that, and I'm just single. So some of them are like, "Oh no, what if she like hangs out with us and she's the third wheel?" I'm like, I don't mind being the third wheel. Like, I get a hang as long as y'all aren't making out when we're trying to eat like sushi or whatever. I'm cool, you know. Like, I don't mind being that single friend because I'm used to it. And also, I love being single. It's just a time in my life. Like, if God wants me to get married, cool. If He doesn't, cool. Um, but then, if they don't invite me because they're afraid or something like that, just giving them the grace to know it's like, it's fine, or like if they don't respond as fast as I would respond, it's like maybe they're busy because, Satan likes to talk in your ear and go, "Oh, they don't like you anymore." I'm like, okay, unless I have proof, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because that's what God said to do. So I'm giving them that grace and the benefit of the doubt. They're probably really tired. Um, for an example, I had one friend and we were going to go walking. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And then I didn't hear anything from her. I'm like, oh no, I hope she's okay. And then she's like, I slept in. I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, you're fine. you know, and then she ends up getting a cold. I'm like, oh, you probably slept in because your body's like, really super tired. And
Yeah.
I'm just telling her it's totally fine. It's not like you got a cold on purpose. Even if she was avoiding me, which I know she's not, it's just like I don't know that for sure. So don't assume those things, anyways.
Yeah, you find life is much easier when you just assume the best in people. Like you
Mhm.
said, unless you have proof, it life is just easier that way.
Yeah.
I've learned that as well. And that takes a retraining of your brain to start thinking that way. And it's the renewing of your mind that Holy Spirit does that helps with that.
Yeah, and it really annoys Satan when you think the best of people and when you're like, it's cool. Even if
Yeah.
someone does do you dirty, you're like, I hope this brings them closer to God and I'm just gonna reach for my Bible. God doesn't mind if you cry on his lap. If it really, really hurt, you can cry. He's not gonna be like, oh, he's gonna love you because that's what he is. So, but then when you do lean in on God, even when the whole world abandons you, or maybe the whole world just doesn't know how to like interact, kind of like, after COVID, after the big shutdown, everyone's like, oh, there are other people in the world. What is this? How do I interact? People have to like retrain themselves, but
Mm.
just leaning on God and just knowing that he's there. It's kind of like how Lloyd is slowly learning how to lean on Yor and Anya,
Yeah.
knowing that other people actually want to help and take care of him. It's just like a good thing and it keeps, Satan and all the bad thoughts at bay. So why not do it?
That's right.
And going back to kind of your when she comes into the picture, she's again a single woman, um, just working I guess like secretary job. It looks like,
I think she is. Yeah, some sort of secretarial work.
and all her friends are like, "Oh, you're 27 or you're 25, and you're not married. What's going on?"
Yeah. Oh, those were giant air quote friends.
Yes.
They're not friends. They they did not do well for her.
Nope.
And it's apparent that, and this is where we kind of get into some of the fan service with Spy Family, where it's obvious from your and Yuri's relationship, again, Yuri being Yor's brother, that Yuri is basically very obsessed with his sister.
Way too obsessed. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Which I'm sure plays it looks like it plays a huge part in
Part
part
two.
2
Yeah.
of the
Oh, boy.
series. Yeah, because we watched I don't think there's a dubbed version of the trailer, but we watched this, well, it wasn't even subtitles, it was just in Japanese. So we're like, I don't know what's going on, but
That looks cool.
it looks great. Yay.
But she comes out automatically starting off her relationship, with a lie, which is not too much different from what Lloyd is doing. But she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to a party, and I'm bringing a date. Oh, you have a boyfriend?" It's like, "Yeah, I do."
Mhm.
And luckily for her, she meets Lloyd and Anya out shopping for a new dress, and just lands Lloyd to be her fake boyfriend, who then becomes her husband through a miscommunication.
Well, it all works out well because, well, he's looking for a wife for the family, and she's, yeah, looking for a stand-in boyfriend when she's getting her dress mended at the shop. Um, and it all works out well. Then they start to go, oh, yeah, I kind of like you, and it's like, you know what? I think we might be good for this family thing, and it looks better. I don't want to, because you're um, didn't want to be thought of as a potential spy and then be like arrested,
Mhm.
basically. So she's like, okay, well, this is probably a good idea for us to go ahead and just get married um, and all of that.
Yeah, and it's really neat because especially when you look at the dresses and how the cars are, this is probably set somewhere maybe in the 50-ish era,
Yep.
even though it's technically not a part of our world. And like back then, if a woman wasn't married at a certain age, it's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Because for men, it's like, oh yes, you're building a career. And then for the women, it's like, what else are you gonna do? So
Yeah.
and then actually it's really funny because being single, I do get that sometimes, not necessarily like in a bad way, like, oh, you must be like something's wrong with you. But some people are like, don't you ever want to get married? Do you hate marriage? And I'm like, I never said I hated marriage. I never said that. So but now instead of being annoyed by it, I'm kind of like, it makes me laugh a little bit because I am a Christian. I do want a husband. I do want kids, but I'm not gonna like go out and just like I'm gonna marry you. And so when people see that and they see that I'm okay with the singleness, and thankfully I'm not in yours position where I'm like, oh no, I could be found out, da da da. Um, but because I'm okay with my singleness, it weirds people out because they're like, but what if you never get married? I'm like, then I never get married. I still have God, he's a big part of life. What? You know?
That's such a great place to be, honestly.
Yeah.
I did not handle that gracefully, if I'm honest. So yeah, what an awesome place. You know how to be content.
Mhm.
Like Paul says, he's like, I know how to be content with a little and I know how to be content with a lot. Like, you're good.
Yeah.
And that's so awesome. I'm glad
Yeah.
you're to that place.
Yeah. It took me a while as well to get to like this contentment. And I don't know, I see a lot of, especially like memes on Instagram where it's just like, I'm fine as a single, and then like 3 seconds later you see them crying, and I'm like, just be okay. Like God's gonna do something in your life. Quit begging him for a spouse when you should be begging him to help you become a better spouse for whoever's gonna come, you know.
Yeah.
For, maybe he's just preparing you for that.
Yeah. Very
But yeah.
true.
And that's what a lot of people have an issue with, is the whole waiting period.
Hmm.
It's like, it's not that like God doesn't want you to be married. He's just shaping and forming you to be that spouse forever who you do marry.
Yeah. Waiting is hard
Yeah.
for anything. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But there's a song out there called like "I'll Be Content in the Waiting" or something like that, and that's hard for anybody. Again, like as you said, for anything, um,
Mhm.
whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's all about choice too. Like everything's about choice. But then you just saying out loud, like, I choose to be okay with being single. I choose to be okay with this. And stuff like that. And then when you actually say it out loud, it's like, oh, it's not any of those like daily affirmations where people are like, I'm gonna get a lot of money, and they chant it.
Right.
And like it's not that, but you're like you're making a choice and a decision because that's what a part of what God made us to do is to make decisions. Um So when I say, I'm gonna choose, I choose to love my family, even though my brothers annoy me. I choose to just be happy where I am in life, and I choose to still keep building myself up. That's I think that's what started me to be content where I am right now. Kind of like writing books. Uh, I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, I won this award, or look, everyone like join my Kickstarter and I can do this really awesome thing. And I'm like, I have a job and debt to pay off, and I'm writing books and trying to get them out. And then for a while that bothered me. Like, I'm like, oh man. But then I realized, it's like, wait, my journey isn't their journey. God has me doing something else for a reason. And, the other people, God has them doing that for a reason. So,
Yeah,
but,
what's awesome is that he wastes nothing.
right?
God wastes nothing. Like everything in your life that you go through is for a reason of some kind or another, or he'll use it, I guess.
Yeah. Like
Um,
if you screw up, he'll be like, look what I can do. Kind of like people who flip
yeah.
trash into treasure, and you're like, oh, wow, how'd you do that? That's
Yeah.
God's with like anything silly or stupid we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of grace in that, where you have the situation where, God, how can you possibly use this situation for your good? How can you turn it into glory and goodness and all that?
Mhm.
And it may not be explained in your lifetime, but you're the leader, and once you get to heaven and spend eternity with God, you'll be able to see what the whole plan was.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with our we kind of discussed found family quite at an extent. Did anybody have any other like miscellaneous points that they wanted to get to, either Rebecca or Elizabeth?
Uh, it kind of goes into the found family a little bit. We
Okay.
were talking about Yuri and how, of course, when he's first introduced to Lloyd, he's suspicious, but then he's like, oh no, like, is he gonna be right for my sister and stuff like that? Because, and I kind of, he does go a little too far, Yuri does, but I kind of understand why he's so protective over Yor. For one, he never knew how she helped them both survive when their parents just like poofed. And for another, he just, you know, that's the whole reason why he's motivated to go, do his job and all that. I guess I could say he's in the secret police and stuff like that. So, like, his whole motivation is protect her, but kind of like for a selfish reason, because he's like, I want to get back to her because, she did everything for me, da da da. And it sounds really sweet, but the way he does it, he's not happy for her that she has a husband, and he doesn't think she can make a choice to do that. Be like, no, this guy's pretty legit. Like, and even though she technically doesn't know Lloyd, for the fact that Yuri's just like, I don't trust Yor at all, I don't trust Lloyd at all. That's basically what he's saying when he's like, how dare she be with him and stuff like that. And, I always wanted to protect her. And he's kind of like choosing to not be a part of their found family at all. Kind of like some people choose to not be a part of God's family because they're like, one aspect of it they just don't like. And instead of exploring it and having an open mind about it and going like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this could be wrong, maybe I'm wrong, let's explore it deeper, instead of studying about it and actually trying
Right.
to figure
They're
out
they're like, what
why
do you mean
it
I can't do that? Well, I'm not gonna do that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, you can't do XYZ because you're a Christian. And I'm like, well, actually, I'm in the time of grace, but I choose not to do it because I love God
Right.
more than the thing,
Exactly. It's not a list of like
But you
do's
can't
and
do.
don'ts. It's more so by spending time with God, you desire other things as
Mhm.
opposed to what your old ways were.
Mhm. Yeah, and God's pretty clear too about I like this and I don't like this. And if you love him, basically, you want to do what he likes and don't do the things that he doesn't like.
Yeah. Yeah, because we trust him to actually know what he's talking about because he kind of
Right.
created everything anyways and us.
Right.
So
And you think
Exactly.
people would have a little bit more faith in someone who created everything, rather than their own, perceived assumptions about them.
Yeah, it's like if the creator of Spy Family was like, "Oh, Lloyd has, like a twin brother or something like that, but he just hasn't shown up," and people are like, "Oh, we don't trust you on that." And he's like, "I'm kind of the creator." Not that he's done that, but for a weird example, I couldn't think of anything except for that. But yeah, if the creator of a show did that and then everyone didn't believe him or her, it's just like, but this is my universe. I created that, Same thing with God. Same thing
Yeah.
with like my books is like, wait, I know my characters more than you do because they're my babies. So when God tells you you're something, like you're wonderfully and fearfully made, he made a plan just for you because he loves you that much. He died for you because he loves you that much. When God tells us that, and then, when Satan's like, oh, he's lying, it's like, wait, should I believe Satan, who didn't create anything and messed everything up? Or should I believe God, who created everything and loves us? Because he didn't have to create us in the first place.
Yeah, and it sounds so simple too to say all of that, and it's all true. In practicality, if you've believed the lies for so long, it's so hard to
Yeah.
make that transition into seeing truth. Because you're like, okay, well, I read the Bible, but I don't I don't believe that. How can that be true? I don't understand. And so it's allowing Holy Spirit to work in your life and to speak to you and to show you truth. He's so faithful to do that. And
Yeah. And
yeah.
it's like Yuri in Spy Family, where he's like, I don't trust that my sister has made a good choice, because he's always, even though she's the oldest, he's always seen her as someone fragile, someone who needs protection. And she might need protection, but she isn't a child. And, she's the one that protected you. You just never saw it because she was able to cover it up. So when you're just like stuck in this like whole mantra of like, this is what the world is and that's it, and I think we all get stuck there at least once. Like even Paul himself got stuck there because he's like, oh, Christians are bad, time to kill them. And then but then we just, what I found in my own life is just starting to say those, like, wait, I'm gonna choose to trust God. I don't understand why he's doing this, but I'm gonna choose to trust him, because that's what faith is. To have faith in God is to trust him and not just go, oh, I trust you, but I'm going to worry about it anyways. It's like, isn't God big enough to like, cover everything? And so it's just little baby steps. Like if you need a couple more dollars in your paycheck, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust you, God, for this couple more dollars. Or if there's like a math problem you're trying to figure out because you're a teenager and you have math homework, it's like, okay, God, I'm going to trust you to help me understand this. Right? He won't do the work for you because he wants you to grow, but he is also going to be there to lead you and guide you, but you have to trust him first. So just saying it out loud and just doing baby steps and then building it up, kind of like muscles. We don't get tough muscles from just like lifting one weight one time. We have to do it over and over and over again.
Yeah, and that's such a great reminder.
Yeah, it's all about, repetition, as you said, baby steps. In my walk, I find it's been difficult for me to, fully trust God with like every situation. By getting better and just saying more of my self-talk has improved. It's like, hey, I have this situation going on, but I am trusting God that He
Exactly.
will guide me, give me the resources for people to go to, talk to about this, so that we can get the best outcome in His will.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. And if anyone out there is just like, but I have so many problems, just do it 1 minute at a time. Like even if you need it a little bit, 1 second at a time. Think of how long you've lived. You've survived this long, and with God, you can just go even more. So, I've had friends and myself where it's just like just 1 minute at a time, just a little chunk at a time. And then, it's kind of like watching the whole series, just one episode at a time. Even if you don't have that much time, you can at least watch one episode. So when trouble comes, just face that trouble. Don't worry about anything else. Try to face that one and remind yourself that God's there. Also remind yourself to read your Bible, audio Bible, anything. Like, get as close to God as possible in that situation. And then just take it one bit at a time. And that'll really help anyone out there who's struggling. Because, God expects you to struggle, but he also expects you to at least say, hey, God, I'm trying. I'm trusting you. Help. And he's like, cool. That's all I wanted is the help.
That's fantastic. Well, Elizabeth, we've greatly enjoyed having you on this episode. If people want to follow you, keep up with what you're doing, how can they find you?
I am on Facebook, but I'm mainly on Instagram with E N Chaffin. And then I also have a YouTube channel, and hopefully I'll have some stuff come out about like how I designed the covers of Pride and Avarice and stuff like that, and a few updates. And if you're really interested, you can go to my website, www.enchaffin or enchaffin.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter, and you can there's some free short stories on there, and you can also figure out where to buy Pride and pre-order Avarice as well.
Nice.
All right, wonderful. Well, again, we have enjoyed talking about Spy Family and the Trope of Found Family. We encourage you guys to check out E N Chaffin and her work. Also, if you're a parent or just somebody wanting to get an introduction to what anime is, again, get this book, A Parent and Guardian's Guide to Anime, Manga, and Cosplay. But until next time, keep those halos shiny and stay holy, my friends.
Thank you for listening to the Alleluia podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to keep up with all the latest information. We would love to hear your comments and questions about today's episode, as well as suggestions for future episodes. You can message us on our socials or email us at contact@alleluia.com.
Okay, let me stop the recording.
Are you petting your dog?